Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this special board meeting to order and acknowledge that we are meeting from many locations in the traditional unceded, unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin people. And I would like to thank the Algonquin Nation for hosting us on their land. We are just 11 trustees, so we do have quorum present, and I believe Trustee Campbell is in the process of joining us. And so I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda tonight. Would someone like to move that? Trustee Fisher is moving that, seconded by Trustee Schwartz. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair, I'd like to add an item.
Trustee Ellis?
Yes, I'd like to add a new number 4, new business, which would make adjournment 5. New business,
to add
yes.
New business?
Yes, please.
And I will ask, given that the bylaws govern what we can and must do within the context of our special meetings, Madam Director, would that be in order?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll defer to Executive Officer Giroux, who usually assists us with our bylaws.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have the section of the bylaws open, but the bylaws provide that at a special meeting, the board can only conduct the business that was listed on the notice of meeting. So if the new business is not germane to the items on the agenda, it would not be appropriate. I'm just trying to think through, and I'll open up my bylaws. There is a provision about the addition of substantive items. In this case, I'm not sure if it's information or substantive, but I can look at that provision if the trustee can clarify.
For me, it's information, but under new business, any trustee can bring something up. So I speak only for myself when I say it's not substantive. It's for information.
My recollection is that it does need unanimous consent of all trustees to add anything to an agenda for a special board meeting. Giroux?
I'm just opening up the bylaws. I'm not sure that provision applies to special meetings. Special meetings are generally for the purposes that were called on the agenda, but just allow me. A special meeting of the board shall be held at the call of the chair or on the request of 6 members. The printed notice of every special meeting shall state all the business to be transacted or considered thereat, and no other business shall be considered unless all members of the board are present and consent. So that's the provision.
So that would require a unanimous vote then to add anything.
That's correct.
Thank you for that clarification. So Trustee Ellis is moving to add new business. Do we have a seconder for that amendment to the agenda? Trustee Lyra will second that. Anything further, Trustee Ellis?
I'd like to call for a recorded vote, please.
And a request for recorded vote is in order time. So I will ask if there's any further discussion on the agenda.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry I'm late to the meeting. Could I have a brief overview of what was just advanced as a proposal?
Trustee Campbell has proposed to add an item after following item 3 called new business.
Okay, thank you.
And so if there's nothing further on the amendment to the agenda, I will call the question on the amendment to the agenda. And this will be a recorded,
Had his hand up.
it is a recorded vote. Sorry, whose hand is up? Trustee Ellis, your hand is up.
Oh, trustee Penny. My hand's up, but it shouldn't be.
And trustee Penny, I don't see your hand up. Is your hand up?
Actually, just carry on, Madam Chair. It's okay.
So it is a recorded vote, and I will ask Manager Guthrie to take the vote, please, on the amendment.
Trustee Boothby,
In favor.
Trustee Hough,
Trustee Huff's hand is up.
Why did I get skipped?
I will come back to you. Trustee Blackburn,
Oh, I apologize.
Hough?
Thank you.
Trustee Hough,
Trustee Huff's hand is up, but her audio is muted.
Trustee Blackburn,
Opposed.
Trustee Campbell, Trustee Ellis,
In favor?
Trustee Campbell, Trustee Jennings,
In favor.
Trustee Penny,
In favor.
Trustee Lyra,
In favor.
Trustee Bell,
In favor.
Trustee Fisher,
Favor.
Trustee Schwartz,
In favor.
Trustee Campbell,
In favor?
Trustee Scott,
In favor. So we have, what is the vote, please?
11 in favor, 1 not.
And since it requires unanimous consent, the amendment fails. So we're back to discussion on the agenda. Is there any further discussion on the agenda? And if not, I will call the question then on the agenda. All those in favor? And those opposed? And the agenda is carried. The motion to approve the agenda is carried. That brings us then to the matters for action. Item 3.1, confirmation of the special board minutes. Would someone like to move confirmation of those minutes? Trustee Schwartz will move, seconded by Trustee Fisher. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes from the 29th of June, 2020?
I'd like to speak, Madam Chair.
Yes, I have Trustee Ellis ahead of you, and then I will recognize you, Trustee Blackburn. Trustee Ellis.
Yes, on page 3, I'm at the bottom, just before the moved section. It reads, following the presentation of Mr. Laskin's report, Trustee Ellis, and here I'd like to add comma, being denied to speak by the chair, and another comma, then recused himself and I'd like to add after the and, stating, quote, "This is just a sham," end quote. He promptly left the meeting.
Thank you for that, Trustee Ellis. I think there may be some discussion about the correct rendering of what happened at that moment. And I have asked Ms. Giroux to review that portion of the meeting. I wonder if she would like to comment.
Through you, Madam Chair. Forgive me, I'm working with multiple devices here. We did take a look at the minutes today or the tape of the meeting, and we were able to record a verbatim excerpt from the transcript, and it is consistent with some of the language of the trustee. So the quote was, "I am blown away with what a sham this whole process is. From the beginning to end, I am recusing myself. And in fact, I'm leaving this meeting. There are serious racism issues here and we're being precluded from discussing them. This is just a sham. Goodbye." It's not our practice to include verbatim transcripts. It's our practice to include a summary of the key facts that inform the decisions. And we can make the adjustment as the trustee has indicated. I don't think he's asked for a full verbatim, but just a summary of what he said.
Thank you, Ms. Giroux. Are there any other errors or omissions? Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So overall, I have concerns about what was said in the meeting versus what is in the minutes. This is a very serious process that we're engaged in, and I've had less than a day to look at it. So I'm going to point out for me what the most significant concerns are, and would ask that the minutes be amended and that they be sent to me as soon as they're amended. If I would like to turn to page 3, please. And at the bottom of the page, the last sentence reads, "Another issue that was inappropriate was when Trustee Blackburn." It's my view, our contention, that the investigator never actually said that, and that could be found. That can be found at 51:29 in the video, 51 minutes, 29 seconds. And I will move on to the next item when staff advises me they've captured that.
Madam Chair, if the member has several amendments and we've not had time to reconcile them, we'll take them all under advisement and review the minutes and the tape.
Thank you very much, through the chair, to Executive Officer Giroux. Turning to page 5, please. Again, the last sentence. If Trustee Blackburn was representing herself as a trustee on Facebook and leveraging her position, it's my contention the investigator never said that. And that can be found at 1 hour, 11 minutes, 28 seconds.
Ms. Giroux,
Sorry.
do you have that?
I have it. Yep.
Thank you. Turning to page 7, please. The paragraph that starts with Trustee Penny. It's actually the first sentence, but second line. That Trustee Blackburn diminished the role of a trustee by harassing. In fact, I think if you check, the word harassing was not in fact used. The word questioning was. And I apologize, I don't have that. I didn't write down the video time. I did, but I don't have it with me. If I find it, I'll text it to you to make life easier for you. Can I move on?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The paragraph that starts with Trustee Jenkins.
Folio?
Oh, sorry, I apologize. Right under that, number 7. Just down a little bit from where I just was. And what's missing in that paragraph is Trustee Jenkins mentioned the notion that I had threatened that he would never graduate. I'd like that added. Okay. And that's at 1 minute, 25.44 seconds. Okay. Thank you. And I did find where I wrote in my notes for the comment Trustee Penny made. That's at 1 hour, 22 minutes and 18 seconds.
Thank you.
All right, and I believe this will be my last one. At the bottom of page 7, and moving on to page 8, it is Trustee Hough's comments. And that can be found at 1 hour, 31 minutes, 0.14 seconds. And what Trustee Hough actually stated was Trustee Blackburn learned that the young man at the basketball court is a high school athlete. She threatened to have him removed from his basketball team, and she threatened that he would never graduate. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. That's Jenkins. That's what I wanted added. I apologize. So for Trustee Hough, she said, as fellow trustees, the emails that we received from the public that extend well beyond the Black community, calling us out for bad behavior, calling us racist, calling us everything under the sun because of behavior of one person on this board. That's what was stated, and I would like that to be reflected in the public record, please.
We'll take that under advisement, Madam Chair. Again, the minutes are not a verbatim transcript. They are a summary of the discussion. We'll review the points raised, appreciate the time references, and we'll bring back a revised set of minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Giroux. Is that everything, Trustee Blackburn?
Yes, Madam Chair, and thank you to Executive Officer Giroux.
Are there any other errors or omissions in the minutes? I see Trustee Ellis, you've already spoken on the minutes. Trustee Blackburn, you've already spoken on the minutes. Trustee Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if the suggested amendments from Trustee Blackburn are a better reflection of what occurred, that's fine. But I'm uncertain, honestly, my own recall is a bit dim, whether some of the statements associated with some of the trustees were meant by the trustees to be a verbatim retelling of what was in the report, or they were meant as statements of their own understanding or interpretation. And the difference could be important with respect to some of the suggested amendments, because whether or not the statements are exactly what was in the report may be irrelevant if that was the trustee's interpretation. So I just...
Well, Trustee Campbell, staff have indicated that they will take these changes under advisement, and I'm sure that they will be looking very carefully at how best to capture any significant.
Okay, great. And I my Zoom timed out and I just came back and I caught the end of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wondered where you had disappeared. I thought you were just stopped talking. Anything else on the minutes? If there's no one else, I would like also to ask for one inclusion in the minutes, and that is with reference to, I think it's on page page 2 of the minutes, in terms, or just a second. It's on page 3, and that is that preceding the comments that Trustee Ellis has asked to have included in this with regard to his recusal. I would appreciate it if staff could also make sure to include that the chair noted that there were, that this was the opportunity for questions of clarification of the investigator, and that there would be opportunity for trustees to make statements later in the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if there's nothing else on the minutes, they have been moved and seconded. And I would like to call the question on confirmation of the minutes as amended. All those in favor?
Chair, if I may. I understand that staff is taking it under advisement. So we're passing minutes that may be different than once staff comes back with what they're saying. I'm just wondering, should we hold off passing these minutes?
Ms. Giroux?
Madam Chair, given the extent of the request for revision, we'd be happy to take these back and bring them back to a board meeting in the future once we've had a chance to look at them. It will take us a bit of time to go through and carefully correct them. So that's fine. If the board wants to defer that.
Well, we hadn't completed our vote on this. So in that case, we will bring the revised minutes back and confirm them at a later meeting. That certainly works. Thank you, Trustee Ellis. So that brings us along then to item 3.2 on our agenda, report 20-064, Code of Conduct, Appeal of Breach and Sanctions Decisions. Madam Director.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Indeed, the report is present with the package. Executive Officer Giroux is present to give an overview of the report, take any questions to inform the next stages of this process. Executive Officer.
Thank you, Madam Director. Through you, Madam Chair, I would like to begin by acknowledging again the ongoing assistance of legal counsel Lynn Harnden, who is with us here this evening, as well as Manager Richard Sinclair and Manager Nicole Guthrie. All have been very helpful as we've worked through these issues. You have the report before you tonight, and just a quick overview of that report. You know that on June the 29th, the board met to consider a complaint under the Code of Conduct. The board received the report of an independent third-party investigator at that meeting, and after deliberation determined that Trustee Donna Blackburn had breached the Code of Conduct with respect to sections 3.8, 3.15, and 3.18. Following the decision regarding the breach, the board considered whether to apply sanctions and did apply sanctions. Under the code, it is the member's right to file an appeal, and an appeal was filed with the secretary on July the 8th. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to consider that appeal. In so doing, the board must confirm or revoke its decision as to whether or not there was a breach of the code. If the board confirms there was a breach of the code, it must then consider whether to confirm, vary, or revoke the sanctions. The appeal is attached to the agenda package. It cites a number of grounds for appeal, and we've reviewed those in the report. In considering the appeal, the board must consider whether it carried out the decision-making process on June the 29th in keeping with the requirements of the board policy and the Education Act, and whether it arrived at its decisions based on the facts provided by the investigator. I think paragraph 10 of the letter of transmittal explains that if the board is of the view that the process established in the policy was followed and the decision was made from without a reasonable apprehension of bias, then the board ought to be satisfied that it has met its duty of procedural fairness. The board will need to have either two motions or a two-part motion this evening. First on the determination of the breach, and then on the question of sanctions, unless the board chooses to revoke its determination. I'm certain that members have other questions, and we have tried to respond to some questions in advance of the meeting. I would invite legal counsel to provide any other introductory remarks if necessary, and then we are happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Harnden?
Yes, I might just make a few general comments regarding the nature of the process this evening and the function that the trustees are performing. Well, the exercise is referred to as an appeal. It's probably more accurate to refer to it as a form of review, because an appeal might suggest there's a new set of facts, there's new evidence, there's new consideration of new matters. But that's not the exercise this evening. Rather, it's only to examine the submissions made in the appeal filed, which I'm sure members of the board have had an opportunity to review, and to reflect on those submissions and make a decision as to whether or not trustees are inclined to reconsider and vary the finding of a violation of the Code of Conduct, number 1, and number 2, reconsider the imposition of sanctions. And just by way of explanation in terms of the rather narrow nature of the process as compared to a full-scale appeal, a lot of the procedural protections in the Code of Conduct are at the front end. There are protections for the trustee during the process of the investigation, and probably most importantly in the context of this evening, there's the opportunity for the trustee who's the subject of the complaint to see a draft of the investigator's report and to make submissions to the investigator as to the accuracy of the facts found in the report. And that's probably the most critical right contained in the procedures in the Code of Conduct to ensure as much as possible that the investigator makes findings of fact that are based on the best information available to him. And so that's part of the backdrop, and that's part of the reason that the exercise this evening is really relatively narrow. Now there's one exception to the principle that you only look at the facts in the investigator's report, and that relates to any allegation of a breach of a principle of fairness or a breach of the principles of natural justice. And when you reflect on those allegations for a moment, they must be based on facts over and above the facts found in the investigator's report. And it's proper for you to consider facts cited in the appeal that raise issues of fairness, issues of natural justice, even though those facts weren't addressed by the investigator. And so there's an important distinction there that I just wanted to remind you of. So as you read through the investigators, or rather the appeal document, you will have noticed that there are allegations of breaches of fairness, breaches of natural justice. When you reflect on those, you can reflect on the facts that are cited to support that, and make your decision in light of your consideration of those facts. And I'm happy to answer any questions that trustees might have regarding the process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harnden. Speaking from the chair, I do want to remind trustees that we are in board, so that at the moment you only have one opportunity to speak to this unless someone moves to go to rules of committee. The second thing I think that is important to note is that two members recused themselves from the original decision, and I would appreciate it if Mr. Harnden could comment on the on the matter of recusal in terms of considering whether or not to confirm the decision previously made.
I would make these comments with respect to the two trustees who recused themselves from the initial process. They did so, to my understanding, on the basis that there were comments made, whether in social media or elsewhere, regarding the complaint and the validity of the complaint. And the trustees felt that this might suggest that they had made a predetermination with respect to the complaint. And they felt that it was according fairness to the trustee who is the subject of the complaint for them not to participate in the initial proceeding. My view is that given this, and I might say laudable acknowledgement of the inappropriateness of their participation in the initial exercise, it would create considerable risk to the board if, in the face of their acknowledgement of their initial prejudgment, that they participated in the appeal proceeding. That is their right, or it's their right to make a decision as to whether they wish to do so. But I'm telling you, as your legal counsel, that would create a risk that if a third party were looking at the overall exercise, that it might feel that the decision taken tonight was detrimentally affected by the participation of trustees who had an acknowledged prejudgment of the issues. Hope that's clear enough.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Harnden. I do have a further question in that regard, and that relates to participating in asking questions about the report from staff and the process.
By the two trustees who had recused themselves?
Yes.
Asking questions of clarification, participating in that matter. Any form of participation creates some risk, but participating in that limited matter would create only a modest level of risk.
So it basically then, if we deal with questions about the report that is before us tonight, and before we begin deliberations on what to do with regard to confirming or revoking the previous findings, then the questions would be allowed, but the participation would be ill-advised in terms of the decision making.
Yes, because the participation beyond asking questions of clarification might be perceived as an effort to influence the opinions of other members of the board, and that's what would cause me concern.
Thank you very much for that. I have a growing list of speakers here. I will ask those who have previously recused to consider carefully what they are going to do this evening. And I will proceed with the speakers list then. If there is a motion to move into rules of committee, there will be an opportunity to do a little more by way of questions potentially. But I think that is up to the board as to whether or not they wish to do that. First person on my list is Trustee Boothby.
Sorry, my hand was left up from the last thing.
Thank you. The next person on my list then is Trustee Ellis.
Thank you. Put my mic on. First, I must take exception with Mr. Harnden's speculation on what I was thinking when I recused myself, but I don't need to go into that. I will be recusing myself for this. And since this is the only item on the agenda and I can't participate, I'll be leaving the meeting, but I'll be watching over on the public channel. So good luck, everyone. Good night.
Thank you very much, Trustee Ellis. Next on my list, I have Trustee Penny.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'd like to put a motion forward.
Please go ahead.
And I would like to ask Manager Guthrie to put the motion on the shared screen. So the text of my motion is, whereas on 29th of June, 2020, the Board of Trustees considered a complaint under the Board Member Code of Conduct and made a determination that Trustee Blackburn had breached sections of the Code of Conduct. And whereas on the 29th of June, 2020, the Board of Trustees determined that in light of the breach of sections of the Code of Conduct by Trustee Blackburn, the board should impose sanctions. And whereas an appeal of the board decisions was filed by Trustee Blackburn on July 8th, 2020, and in accordance with policy P.073, Board Member Code of Conduct, the board must decide whether to confirm or revoke the decision regarding breaches of the Code of Conduct, and whether to confirm, vary, or revoke the decision regarding the imposition of sanctions for such breaches. And whereas, if you could scroll down, Manager Guthrie. And whereas the board is satisfied with the process set out in the Code of Conduct was followed, and the third-party investor gave Trustee Blackburn sufficient information to know the case against her and to respond in evidence, that the decision of the board was free from bias or reasonable apprehension of bias, and that the sanctions imposed on Trustee Blackburn were proportional to the findings of fact. Therefore, it be resolved that the board confirms the determination made on June 29th, that Trustee Blackburn, and if you could scroll down, please, Manager Guthrie, breached policy P.073 Board Member Code of Conduct, and the board confirms its decision regarding the sanctions imposed on Trustee Blackburn, the special board meeting of June 29th, 2020.
Thank you, Trustee Penny. Do we have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Trustee Schwartz will second. Do you have further introduction, Trustee Penny? You have about 3 minutes left.
Just very, very quickly, Madam Chair, that the power to impose sanctions and have findings of Code of Conduct is contained both in our Code of Conduct policy and with the Education Act. So I think we are well within our purview to do so. I believe that we complied absolutely fully with the Code of Conduct policy. With regards to the issue of procedural fairness, I think that the mere fact, as stated by Mr. Herndon, that Trustee Blackburn had a fulsome opportunity to review the evidence against her and respond answers that question. And me personally, I did not consider facts outside the investigator's report when making my determination of breach. As far as the proportionality of sanctions, I feel that given the impact of Trustee Blackburn's breach, and that the sanctions are proportional to and appropriate for the breach of that code. And that's my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Penny. Next on my list, I have Trustee Bell.
I believe Trustee Evans was before me, but I'm happy to go. Or okay. Just one quick question. Thank you so much to the staff and to the lawyer and to all of the people that have been involved in this. My question comes, it's for Ms. Drew or the director, if possible. It's regarding the resource implications that are identified in the memo on this. So currently it states the resource implications associated with the appeal process are staff time and legal costs. I'm wondering if you could speak to how much staff time and what the estimated costs of continuing on this process, this appeal process have been.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll begin and I'll pass it to Executive Officer Giroux. In the last report, there was an identification of the costs and the time to date that was identified as a range. And indeed, that continues to be accrued. I'll ask Executive Officer Giroux to make comment on that, as she has been closer to the process from the point of view of documenting the resource allocation for this process.
Through you, Madam Chair. I'll deal first with external costs. In our initial report, we estimated those costs to be in the range of $30,000 to $50,000. I can tell you that we will, in all likelihood, exceed the $50,000 mark if we haven't done so already, in terms of external fees. In terms of staff time, as the director indicated, there's been a significant time investment at every stage in this process. The appeal stage, I haven't thought through to quantify it. I would say there's probably the equivalent of maybe 2 FTE days of work at this stage. We've only had the appeal since the 8th. It's quite a bit of time going into preparations, etc. So there's no question that the cost is substantive as at every step of the way as we move through this process. What's perhaps challenging is the timing of this relative to the timing of other things that are happening in the district.
Trustee Bell.
Just thank you very much for your work and your response.
Thank you, Trustee Bell. If that's everything, moving on then to Trustee Lyra.
So I'm going to be recusing myself the same reason I recused myself last time. And if people have questions, I'd love if they reach out and ask me why I'm recusing myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Lyra. I have Trustee Fisher next on my list. Trustee Fisher, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now, Madam Chair?
Yes, could you speak up a bit, please, or get closer to your mic?
Is that better?
That's much better.
All right, thank you. I won't turn on my Wi-Fi just because I don't have a great reception, but I have 3 questions that are what I consider to be sort of administrative in nature. And I want to ask them just to ensure of my own comfort in terms of my fiduciary and duty of care responsibilities. And so the first question I have is that in the appeal document that was provided to the board, there was a question, there was an allegation about the trustees' access to the in-camera portion of the meeting that was held on June 29th. And my understanding is that the trustee is supposed to be given access to parts of the meeting or all parts of the meeting where there's a determination of a breach of the code and if there is a breach, sanctions. I would like confirmation from staff and council that because the in-camera was dealing with issues outside of that determination, it was, if I recall, was to do with questions of bias or prejudgment, that we were within our scope to preclude the trustee from participating in that discussion.
Thank you, Madam Director.
And through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask our counsel, Mr. Hardin, if you'd comment on that question, please.
Yes, there's a tension between two rights in play. There's the right of the trustee who's the subject of the complaint to be present and to hear all the discussions regarding the merits of the complaint. And then you weigh that against the right of the trustees who are making their decision to receive legal advice in terms of the appropriate manner of proceeding. There's no question but that if the trustees proceeded in camera and engaged in a discussion regarding the merits of the complaint, which was not available to be observed by the trustee who was the subject of the complaint, that would be improper. However, if the purpose of the in-camera meeting was confined to a substantive question regarding the manner of proceeding, such as giving guidance to a trustee who wanted to know whether he or she should recuse themselves given certain fact situations, in my opinion, that's not an improper use of the in-camera exercise. It's appropriate in that circumstance to receive confidential information from the board's legal counsel. So on that basis, I don't think there was any impropriety in the decision to have an in-camera session during the course of the general meeting.
Okay, that's very helpful. The second question I have is that there was an allegation that the investigator fell outside the parameters of the complaint and the remit provided to him. Can staff and council provide their comfort, their attestation that they feel the investigator stayed within inside the complaint and the remit that was provided to him?
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, I'll again turn the question to Council Lynn Harnden.
Yes, I noted that allegation as well. And to a certain extent, we're not privy to all of the exercise that the investigator undertook in terms of his investigation. But we know that he had the guidance of the procedures set out in the Code of Conduct, and those procedures are aimed at ensuring procedural fairness is accorded to the trustee who's the subject of the complaint. Fortunately, you've all heard the investigator give his report, and so you have some sense of his approach and his thoroughness and the manner in which he made his judgments. And I'm comfortable, based on the facts that I have, that he did not act in conflict with the direction that is given to him under the Code of Conduct.
Okay, that's very helpful. And I guess the last question I have was an issue that had come up earlier in the discussion about the ability for the trustee to request and receive information from the investigator. If I understand correctly, the facts are, how do I put this? The trustee has every opportunity to engage with the investigator to provide their version of the events, their facts that need to be then provided into the report, and that the trustee in question has an opportunity to review the draft report to ensure that the report is accurately reflects their version of the events. And so just help me understand, is the trustee entitled to request and to receive any and all information that the investigator receives through their interviews with other complainants, or is the trustee only entitled to engage with the investigator through their own interview and through providing their version of events, and finally having the opportunity to comment on the draft report?
There's no provision in the Code of Conduct, nor is there a principle of natural justice or fairness that dictates that the investigator disclose every item, every factual matter that he may have picked up in the course of his investigation. That's not his obligation. What is his obligation, though, is to disclose to the trustee all of the facts that he's going to find in his report, and to give the trustee an opportunity to comment and to hear those comments, weigh them, and to amend his report accordingly. Now, that doesn't mean that the outcome is that his report reflects precisely what the trustee thinks are appropriate findings of fact. But the important part is that he has heard the trustee. That trustee is given the opportunity to attempt to persuade him to alter his findings, modify his findings. And I believe, and you all heard from the investigator, I believe that exercise did occur in the manner contemplated by the Code of Conduct. So I'm comfortable with that aspect of the process.
Thank you to our council, and Madam Chair, those are all my questions.
Thank you, Trustee Fisher. I have no other hands up. Are there any other speakers to the motion? I am seeing none. So with that, I will return to the mover, Trustee Penny, for wrap up.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would urge my fellow trustees to vote for this motion for the reasons I previously stated in the introduction. I would like to express my appreciation to the staff for all their hard work in putting all the material together, and also to Mr. Herndon for his hard work. I would like to say, you know, it's maybe time to move on to the more important things that are facing us right now. So thank you very much. And that wraps it up.
Thank you, Trustee Penny. So we are now going to hold a recorded vote on the motion that is before us. The two active clauses being that the board confirms the determination made on the 29th of June 2020 that Trustee Blackburn breached policy P.073 board member code of conduct. And part B, the board confirms its decision regarding the sanctions imposed on Trustee Blackburn at the special board meeting of 29 June 2020 with a copy of the board motion attached for reference. So everyone is clear on what is before us, and I will ask Manager Guthrie to please conduct the vote.
Trustee Boothby,
In favor.
Trustee Hough,
In favor.
Trustee Campbell,
In favor?
Trustee Jenkins,
In favor.
Trustee Penny,
In favor.
Trustee Bell,
In favor.
Trustee Fisher,
In favor.
Trustee Schwartz,
In favor.
Trustee Scott.
In favor.
That's
And
9 in favor.
that is 9 in favor, and Trustee Lyra is recused, and so the motion is carried because I think there are none opposed who are eligible to vote.
Madam Chair, just to
And
confirm,
that,
Madam Chair, just to confirm, Trustee Ellis recused as well.
Trustee Ellis recused, and Trustee Ellis is absent because he left the meeting immediately after he recused. So that meant that there are 10 of us here who theoretically would be eligible. One of us is recused, so 9 of us voted in favor of the motion, and that means that the motion is carried. So with that, that concludes the agenda for tonight's meeting. I would like to reiterate my appreciation, and on behalf of all trustees, everyone's appreciation for the hard work that staff have put into this. It has not been an easy process. And certainly we have benefited a great deal from the participation of our legal counsel, Mr. Herndon, on this as well. So thank you very much to everyone. I declare the meeting adjourned.